Call the meeting of the Education and Government Committee to order. First up, any discussion from any legislators? Hearing none, our first item of business for this evening is a resolution confirming an appointment made by the county executive to the Montgomery County Ethics Board. This is to replace the seat vacated by Mr. McMahon. I'd look for a sponsor in a second.
Sponsor.
Roy, in a second. Barbara, very good. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of moving to full board?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes through. Under other business this evening, does anybody have anything to come before the committee? If not, I want to go through a couple things in our rules of procedure pertaining to resolutions and appointments, just to clarify, make sure we're all on the same page. All 9 of us are here tonight. I know there's been some concerns brought up about the committee process. There only being 3, so I want to point out a few specific things in the rules of procedure. Hopefully we'll address some of your concerns. These are all, I'll point out, these are all things that have been in the rules of procedure. They were not changed either this past January or the January before. When it comes to resolutions, I want to point out sections 202 E, F, and G of the rules of procedure dealing with inclusion, exclusion, and discharge of resolutions. E and F deal with what resolutions are put on committee agendas. And it states that the resolutions included in an agenda are to be decided by the chairperson of the legislature and the chairperson of the respective committee. However, if a resolution is excluded from an agenda, it has to, the person choosing to exclude that, whether it be the chairperson of the legislature or the chairperson of the committee, needs to provide written notification citing the reasons for exclusion to the requester of that resolution and the entire legislature at least 5 days before that meeting occurs. So if I, as chair of Education Government, said, no, I don't want this ethics resolution on, I would have to submit a written notification saying why I'm not allowing it on to the requester and the entire legislature 5 days before this meeting this evening. If, when it comes to the full board meeting at the end of the month and Chairman Kelly decides not to put it on, he would have to do the same 5 days before that, just to make that very clear. Subsection D, dealing with resolution discharge, says that any decision by the chairperson of the legislature or a committee chairperson to exclude a resolution or discussion item from an agenda may be overruled by a motion to discharge the resolution. A motion to discharge must have a sponsor and a second, and it requires a majority vote of the legislature or the committee, whichever meeting it is taking place. And if the motion to discharge passes, it places that resolution on the agenda for that meeting. The other subsection I want to point out in section 202 deals with sponsorship. The only regulation in our rules of procedure dealing with sponsorship only states that all proposed resolutions and local laws must have a sponsor and at least 1 second reduced to writing before consideration at a regular or special meeting. Meaning that anybody, there's no regulation on who can sponsor a resolution, who can second a resolution. Therefore, at a committee meeting, any legislator can sponsor or second a resolution. They just need those sponsors and second before consideration at a regular or special meeting. Now, you could interpret that as being, I would say that taking a sponsor or a second at that regular or special meeting would be okay. It's just before the consideration. When it comes to committees in particular, and if anybody has any questions as I go through these, please just feel free to interrupt. When it comes to committees specifically, dealing with the 3-member committees. We've discussed, I think, at length, both through meetings and on the side, the pros and cons of 3-person, 5-person, committee of the whole, no committees altogether. And I think it's something that's yet to, we have yet to see the benefit or the detriment of the change in committee, being only 1 month in. But I do want to point out, dealing with the chairperson of the legislature as an ex officio member, that as an ex officio member, the chairperson of the legislature is on every committee as an ex officio member. Now, what that means in terms of participating is that, like every other legislator in the room, the chairperson has the right to participate in any and all discussion at a committee meeting. However, he or she does not have the right to participate in a vote on that committee. And that's the role of the ex officio member of the committee. So I just want to point that out specifically. Subsection 203A8 of dealing with committees. It deals with committee review, and it states that every committee shall take every item on the agenda and provide a recommendation either for approval or disapproval by a simple majority vote of a committee. So for 6 out of our 7 committees, that would require 2 affirmative votes to pass a recommendation. Now, that means that when we generally, I think all of us practice and use the passing to full board, that's without a recommendation. We can pass to full board with a recommendation to disapprove or a recommendation to approve. So either a positive or negative recommendation. Additionally, the committee can choose to, in effect, kill the resolution in committee if no recommendation receives 2 affirmative votes. If that is the case, and I want to quote this specifically, the committee, if a resolution were to fail in committee, the committee chairperson shall notify the sponsor of such resolution or local law of its disapproval, and the committee shall file a report with the legislature stating its disapproval and outlining the reasons therefor. No item is to be reported out of committee without recommendation by at least a simple majority. So in effect, if a resolution dies in committee, it is the responsibility of that committee chairperson to notify the sponsor, and it is the responsibility of the committee as a whole to file a report with the office of the legislature stating why it was disapproved. The next subsection deals with discussion, and it points out that any legislator can speak on any issue during any committee meeting. So there's nothing preventing any legislator from speaking at any committee meeting. Additionally, the following section, section 10 of this subsection, deals with public comment during committee meetings. And it states that the committee chairperson can give leave for public comment. However, if the committee chairperson chooses not to, a majority of the committee can vote to do so, the same being true for a full board meeting. And then the last thing that I want to cover that I think is probably the most important in our discussions is dealing with discharge from committee. So I'm just going to read the whole provision out loud. It states that the legislature can discharge from committee a matter that has been referred to it upon which the committee has not reported back to the legislature, or which has been defeated in committee by a majority vote of the legislature as fully constituted. It cannot be voted upon the same day except by unanimous consent of the legislature. So basically, what this means is, let's say this resolution that came before the Education and Government Committee this evening was defeated. And 2 weeks pass by, and we are sitting here at the full legislature's meeting. Any member could make a motion to discharge that defeated resolution from the Education and Government Committee, and it would require 5 votes to be placed on the agenda. If, for some reason, we were to hold a full regular meeting this evening, it would require unanimous consent to be placed on the agenda. Why I point these things out specifically is I know there has been fears with the smaller committee size that there could be issues brought up, whether they be brought up from department heads, the executive, or legislators, that if they go through the right channels and the right committees, could be silenced altogether. And the fact is that that's impossible to happen. Even if it's defeated within a committee, the legislature can vote to place that on the agenda, requiring 5 votes. So there's absolutely no way any issue can be completely silenced on the legislature. If there was at some point, a political situation where there was a lone legislator that really wanted to discuss something and requested that that resolution be put forth, if the chairperson of the respective committee denied it, there would have to be a report filed, and there could still be a motion to discharge. If it went through committee and it was defeated, there would have to be a report filed, and there can be a motion to discharge. And these mechanisms are put in place to prevent just that from happening. All of that being said, dealing with committees or anything else, is there any discussion to come before the committee?
Well, I think you answered my question, because basically then no 2 committee members could act as gatekeepers preventing legislation from getting to the full board, if indeed there were 5 members of the full board who wanted to vote on that particular issue.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example. This resolution that passed through this committee tonight, let's say I as chairperson or 2 committee members either defeated the resolution from moving forward, or I said, no, it's not going to be included. And we move on, and we are here at the full legislature meeting, and any person could make a motion to discharge that resolution, and it would require 5 affirmative votes to discharge that resolution. So while if it appears on the full legislative meeting or budget and finance, which is also of 9, requires 5 votes, anything needs 5 votes to pass. So if the motion to discharge failed, most likely the resolution would have failed as well, but it needs a simple majority to pass. And really, in essence, there's no way any 1, 2, 3 people can prevent anything, or 4 people can prevent anything from coming before the legislature or any committee. 5 people obviously can prevent something from happening, but that's I think a rarity, and that it would come to that. So I just want to point those things out for you.
No, a little bit more. So a legislator who wants to discharge, motion to discharge, that goes through like any other motion. There's discussion, and then there has to be 5 votes, and then it's placed on the agenda and voted on.
Yes, there needs to be a motion and a second. I'm trying to see if it's in our rules, whether you can interrupt or if debate is allowed. I'm not seeing it right off the top here, but it's a motion, a second, and it requires a majority vote. There are some motions that you can interrupt at any point and make. I doubt it would be those are usually held for point of order and stuff like that. And I would assume that there would be debate allowed, but I need to look at that specifically.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have to understand this. So hypothetically, I guess what I'm not understanding is the time frame. Can you go over that again? So is there a time frame of, all right, tonight's resolution that you brought up failed to go. So Duke and I say, hey, we really want to discuss that. Did you say it has to happen at the next full board meeting? Or when can that happen? It can't happen 4 months from now, or could it?
If it stays in committee, it can be discharged at any point.
Well, it's not in committee if it failed, right?
If,
Or is it? If 2 members didn't vote,
If-
so,
okay, so if a resolution, this resolution this evening was put up for a vote to move to full board without recommendation, and it failed with 2 committee members voting nay, any legislator at the full legislative meeting could make a motion to discharge.
is
That,
that still in committee now? What you just
No.
described, that's not in committee.
so let's say we had this resolution this evening, and there were 2 members of this committee that said, no, we're not gonna move it to full board.
Got it.
Unless one of us changes our mind before the committee adjourns and says, I'm gonna make a motion to reconsider, nothing changes. It's dead in committee.
Now, the full board meeting comes up and Duke and I want to bring it up with 3 other members. When does that have to be done by? The next meeting?
There's
Anytime?
no time limit. So it's dead, the resolution is dead in committee, and it remains dead in committee in perpetuity unless it be brought up. You know, I think probably, a reasonable, there's no record keeping on resolutions that die in committee other than the minutes. So if, let's say this died in committee this evening, if a year from now we want to make a committee or a ethics board appointment to make that motion to discharge, I suppose you probably could.
There is this report that's filed, so there is a record.
Well, yes, if it was defeated, correct. Thank
So the
you.
report's filed, it gets defeated tonight, for instance, this resolution. The report's filed by the committee saying why they defeated it. And then, and maybe everybody will disagree with me, but to me, it seems as though we should have some sort of process in which this thing is either done with or has to be brought up in another form at some point, or even at the meeting, let's say we want to bring it up. Is there a special place that we could put on our agenda for discharge resolutions if you were to have them? So nobody's just blurting it out in the middle of a meeting and saying, I want to bring this up. Maybe we have a place on our agenda for that purpose. And if none happen to come up, they don't come up, but that's the area where they do on the agenda. I'm just trying to think of a process so that we all understand it and know it, and know that's the time to do it if somebody's going to do it.
We of course could do that, but then, defeating something in committee, there would be, I'm trying to think, because you can make at any point a motion to rescind or repeal a resolution or local law from the past 200 years of Montgomery County government. And nothing ever disappears, in theory with dealing with resolutions. So, I could make a motion to repeal a resolution from 1905, this month, but we wouldn't want to keep that on the docket.
I'm not saying keep that on the docket. Forget about the time constraint. What I'm saying is we have a process in place that says if something's going to be discharged from committee, here's the time to do it in each and every agenda. Not any specific one, but here's when it's done, just like we have other at the end of a meeting on our agenda. And then everybody knows the game we're playing by. So if you have one that you want to discharge from committee in that particular month, that's when you do it.
So the mechanism you're kind of suggesting would be that if anything was on the agenda for a committee and was voted, did not receive a simple majority or whatever the majority needed to pass out of committee, that remain on some sort of like an unfinished business
No, I'm not
type.
saying that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I agree with you. Forget about it. We can go back to 1905. All I'm saying is on our agenda, just like we have an agenda every month, public comment.
New business or
Unfinished business, new business, have some place on our agenda for a discharge of resolutions. And if we don't do it that month because we don't have any, it's like we won't do it all year. But but at least there's an avenue and a place where everybody in this room understands it, so nobody's confused. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
In the absence of it appearing on the agenda as a specific agenda item, the chairman of the legislature would control when he or she would recognize the individual attempting to do this. I think in the absence of it being on the agenda, probably the logical place to do it would be under other. And, you know, if I was the chairman, I would, and I knew that someone wanted to do this, I'd say, well, bring it up under other and we'll deal with it. It seems like that would be a logical place. I think you're right, Tom, in that it's probably not going to happen with any great deal of frequency.
Yeah.
To have it
I
as
wasn't
a
saying like keep a docket of
item
old ones,
on
I'm
the
not talking
agenda.
about that anymore, I'm just saying a process so we all know it.
Well, let me point this out, and maybe this will, I think this may answer your question. If a resolution is defeated in committee, or if that resolution is pulled from committee or any meeting, the chairperson needs to notify the entire, in both cases, the chairperson of the committee or the chairperson of the legislature needs to notify the entire legislature of that happening. So while it wouldn't be on the agenda, let's say that resolution was defeated in this committee this evening, I would have to send out a notification to all 8 of you stating that it was defeated in committee. So, you know, that would, it's mandated right in there, whether it be removed, whether it be pulled, or whether it be defeated, the entire legislature needs to be notified, which, you know, I think possibly in effect might be accomplishing what you're considering.
Kind of, but do you remember we had a resolution that we talked about reconsidering, it may have been with a property or something,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
gonna be, well, was it a special meeting or is it a, I'm just looking more for structure of when we can do that. Because, you know, 10 years from now, some chairman may, oh, wait a minute, you can't bring that up right now.
Well, I'll answer that. Because a special meeting, it can only be called, only business can be conducted for which the meeting was called.
Forget about special meeting,
So,
regular meeting.
a motion to discharge from committee could only be made at a regular board meeting. When it takes place, if you cannot interrupt the regular flow of business, it would have to be made during other business.
Sounds logical, until it happens, and there is no structure. Because we just talked about it, the gatekeeper not being able to be shut down, and I can foresee future, or where chairman says, oh, no, you can't do that right now. Where does it say you can do that right now?
Well, so a motion to discharge a resolution could not be made at a special meeting,
Right.
unless a special meeting was called specifically for that. According to our rules, you can only conduct business.
Well, but if the special meeting in this instance were called for the purpose of confirming appointments of the executive to the ethics board, and this particular resolution had not been discharged from this committee, that would certainly be an appropriate point to do it. It would be the exact topic of for which the special meeting was called. It might be unlikely, but it
But
could happen.
even at that, you would know that it was going to be discussed at that meeting. Those are the 2 times that a motion to discharge something from a committee could be made. And that very specific instance would be the only time that it could be done during a special meeting. Other than that, it would have to be done under other and again, that would be, under other, there's nothing preventing any motion to do anything with something that's been acted on in the past happening.
We don't have to spend any more time, just keep it in mind, that's a concern.
I understand that.
I want things structured,
Yes.
so I know when
I guess
when I can.
the one thing that I would just finish off with that saying is if anything was defeated or was withdrawn from a committee or a regular meeting, everybody would have to be notified. Everybody would be on the same page because everybody would have to be notified. When the motion to discharge would happen, that would really be up to whoever's making that motion to discharge. If it happened you know, this month, or, and it would have to happen under, it couldn't happen when anything else was on the table. So you couldn't interrupt discussion for something else to make a motion to discharge.
Say that?
It doesn't say you can interrupt, where some motions it said, Robert's rules state that you can interrupt, like a calling for point of order, or matters of the day, or roll call. You can interrupt what's going on, you can interrupt anybody to make that motion. Legislator Wheeler.
Okay, couple things. For the full board, under rules of procedure, section 105, there is no other. So if, we would have to change those if we wanted to add that. So when you were trying to, when Tom asked where, to bring it up under the full board, I didn't know, I was seeing Doug kind of figure out, and I was thinking old or new business. But what I was really thinking about is we may have an actual practical case coming up sooner rather than later, dealing with this.
Well, let me jump in there. I think with it being on the agenda for old business and new business,
Yep.
that doesn't necessarily, it's business. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean resolution. So,
Okay.
you know, it could be a discussion, old business, new business can be a discussion item, it can be a resolution, it can be a local law, it can be a vetoed resolution, a tabled resolution, and just the same, new business can be discussion items, and it can be, you know, anything new to come before the legislature.
I would say it would more appropriately, this discussion, what you're talking about in this discussion would more appropriate fall under new business than old, because it wouldn't be old business of the legislature itself, because it had not come from a committee. It would be new business to the actual full legislature, rather than old.
I would have preferred other if it was a choice, but thank you, Doug. Okay. And if sooner rather than later that comes up, you can kind of help us guide through that new
I'll be here for
process.
the foreseeable future.
Fabulous.
Any other discussion pertaining to committees or anything on education and government?
Yes. You talked earlier, I was a little confused, you talked earlier about the ex officio, the chair being the ex officio member. And are you taking that from Robert's Rules of Order?
I'm taking that from our rules of procedure that have been, and this, I mean, you can look back, this has been something that's, you know, been stated in our rules of procedure that the chairperson of the legislature shall serve as an ex officio member of every standing committee and may be counted towards a quorum of the same.
Okay, but forget it. That answered my question.
They may-
Stop right there.
okay.
I was, that's what I was talking about, the quorum, because
Okay, yeah, I left that
I
out,
always
but-
thought it was able to be used towards a quorum.
Towards a quorum, can participate in any and all discussion, but cannot vote on anything that
I didn't
requires
hear that
vote.
the first time through. That's what confused me.
Any other discussion?
Sure. On last month's agenda, there is a other under new business, under number 11. It says a resolution to be honored.
Other is something that we, you know, that's sort of been, I think, an internal thing that we always put on under, you know, new business. New business is, do we even need to list technically resolutions on? You have to list them in title, as per our rules. But new business can be any new business, just the same as, so at a full legislative meeting, if we didn't have other on the docket under new business, the chairperson should still say, is there any other business to come before this board? If not, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Hearing that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Roy, in a second. We are adjourned.